In this video, I'm going to talk about Lyft passenger injury claims. I may touch on the claims of an injured Lyft driver as well, but the focus is going to be on Lyft passenger injury claims. I'm going to talk about how insurance works, an actual $70,000 settlement I had for a Lyft passenger, and everything in between. Stay tuned and watch the whole video so you get a better understanding how Lyft injury claims work. JZ Helps of Florida Injury Law Firm. I'm injury attorney Justin Ziegler. I represented a gentleman who was a Lyft passenger, and we settled his injury claim for $70,000 in total. $45,000 of that was paid by Lyft's insurer at the time, Zurich American Insurance Company. $25,000 was paid by the at-fault driver's insurance. They were insured by Geico. My client claimed that his neck, his foot, and his hand were injured in the crash. We claim that cartilage was either torn from the accident in both his foot and his hand, or the accident aggravated, meaning it worsened a tear that he had in his foot and his hand. One important thing to note is Lyft's insurer, Zurich American Insurance Company, their first offer may be a lot lower than the final offer that you end up settling for. Now, Lyft really isn't involved with the claim. What happens is the Lyft vehicles are insured with the Zurich American Insurance Company, and Zurich has hired York Claims, York Risk Management Group, to administer the claims. So York is the one handling the claim, but the money is being paid by Zurich American Insurance Company, who is the insurer. York's initial offer was $16,000, and we settled for $45,000. Again, this is just for the uninsured motorist insurance portion of the claim, which I'll get into in a moment. But it's important to know that that first offer was only about 35%, about 1/3 of the total final offer from York. So just because you get a low first offer doesn't mean that the case is bad. And sometimes the insurance companies have a lot of room to move and pay you more. Other times, they may not have much room to increase their offer. Once we settled the case with York, who again was the third-party administrator for the uninsured motorist insurer of the Lyft vehicle that my client was a passenger in, and my client signed the release, York sent the check rather quickly, so that was nice. There wasn't any delay there. My client, as a passenger, qualified through PIP, Personal Injury Protection Insurance, through the Lyft vehicle. My client did not own a car at the time of the crash. He did not live with any relatives who owned a car at the time of the crash. Therefore, the next place to look for PIP insurance was through York. And my client had to fill out a form and swear under oath that he did not own a car or live with anyone who owned a car. And then York processed his PIP benefits, and essentially they paid $10,000 to his doctors. I believe they paid 100% of the doctor's bills up to the $10,000, whereas most of the time in Florida, PIP pays 80% of the doctor's bill. So I found that to be unique. It's very interesting to note that starting on July 1st, 2017, Lyft cars, when there's a passenger inside the car, do not have to have personal injury protection insurance. However, Lyft, as recent as September 22nd, 2017, that's the most recent certificate of insurance that you can find online on Lyft's website, actually, they actually say that all their policies are covered with personal injury protection insurance. So whether the driver's driving and he has the app on, it must be on, the driver can get PIP insurance through Lyft. Or if a passenger's in there, Lyft's policies still allow PIP insurance. The downside with the fact that the Lyft vehicles are covered with PIP insurances is that if the Lyft vehicle causes an accident due to the Lyft driver's negligence, the injured party will likely need to have a permanent injury in order to get money for pain and suffering. Now, in this case, just a little facts about it. My client was a passenger, and another car, it was allegedly wet roads, and another car rear-ended, crashed into the back of the car that my client was a passenger in the Lyft vehicle in. The other driver who caused the crash He was insured with Geico Insurance. They paid $25,000 of the settlement. So what happens is, because we argued that my client's injuries were worth more than $25,000, the next place to look, if there's no other bodily injury liability insurance, which is what existed on the car that caused the accident, we then look at uninsured motorist insurance. So Lyft required my client to fill out an affidavit stating he didn't have any uninsured motorist insurance, or that he didn't own any vehicles that had uninsured motorist insurance, or live with anyone who had any vehicles that had uninsured motorist insurance. And after he filled out that affidavit, Lyft accepted that there was uninsured motorist insurance through York and Zurich. And we ultimately settled the claim, like I had said, for $45,000. But it's a good idea for the Lyft passenger to fill out this affidavit from day one and send it to York Insurance Company so that they get the ball rolling for the uninsured motorist insurance claim, because if someone waits too long to send the affidavit, that could delay the settlement with the uninsured motorist insured. But getting that affidavit to the York representative, again, that's Lyft's insurers, the company that they're using to administer the claims, the sooner they get it, the better, and the sooner they can set up the uninsured motorist claim and establish that coverage exists. Now, in the state of Florida, if you are making a claim for personal injury protection insurance, which, like I said, if you're inside a Lyft, there is PIP insurance, as right now Lyft has it on their policy, although they're not required to. You have 14 days to get medical treatment. Otherwise, there's no PIP. And a doctor needs to diagnose you with an emergency medical condition. Otherwise, the PIP is only limited to $2,500 and not $10,000. So it could be a big loss of PIP benefits. PIP pays up to $10,000 of your lost wages and or your medical bills. I had mentioned that I represented the passenger in the Lyft case. If he would have owned a car, his PIP insurance would have likely been the source that would have paid PIP insurance benefits. Or if he would have lived with a relative, then their PIP insurance on their vehicle would have paid for his PIP benefits to his doctors and his lost wages. However, in my case, he didn't own a car, live with anyone who owned a vehicle who was his relative. That's why Lyft's PIP insurance paid. If the Lyft driver does not have their own ride share coverage, meaning that they specifically told their personal auto insurer that they drive for Lyft, then their insurance company is likely going to deny coverage for the claim. For example, if they have Geico or State Farm and they never told State Farm they're driving for Lyft, State Farm or Geico is going to deny coverage, and the passenger can't make a claim against the personal auto insurer. However, once the passenger is inside the car, the passenger can make a claim if the Lyft driver caused the accident for up to $1 million of bodily injury liability insurance. If a Lyft passenger is injured in an accident, it's a good idea for them to get the Lyft PIP application. In the comment section to the video or below the video, I have a link to the article that I wrote that I'm basing this video on, and I have the actual Lyft application that was used, the Lyft PIP application that was used in my claim. If I were to represent someone again in a Lyft claim, a Lyft passenger, I would immediately have the Lyft passenger complete the PIP form, just again to get the ball rolling. And this assumes my client did not have their own auto insurance on their vehicle or live with a relative who had PIP auto insurance. Now, Lyft's PIP auto insurance does not have a deductible, which is nice for the injured passenger or even the driver if the driver happens to be injured and is making a PIP claim. If the York adjuster or Lyft's insurer's adjuster wants to take your recorded statement, you have to give them your recorded statement. Part of the duties of the policy are to comply with it. So you have to comply with reasonable requests. If they want to take your examination under oath, you have to agree to that as well. And the scope, they can ask you a lot of different questions. They can ask you about your prior injuries. They can ask you about how the accident happened, what your current injuries are, who you've treated with, and other things. It's important to note that everything that you tell the York adjuster or Lyft's insurance adjuster is going to be documented in their notes. And if they record the call, it's all going to be there for them to transcribe and put into writing. So it can later be used against you, so use your words very carefully. You need to be honest. Nothing is worse in an auto accident injury claim than lying to an adjuster. One lie that you may think is saving you money can ultimately crush an entire case, and I've seen people lie in auto accident claims in general over things that are very, very minor and potentially blow an entire case, so always tell the truth. If PIP insurance applies in the case, the next source where your medical bill should be sent to is your health insurance or Medicare or Medicaid, if any of that insurance applies. And then oftentimes if PIP is paid, your health insurance may not pay anything and the medical provider may write off the bills. But once the PIP is exhausted, then the health insurance pays at the contracted rate. And understand that oftentimes in Florida, your health insurance may have a lien on the settlement. So let's say the health insurance company pays $5,000. They may be entitled to recoup up to $5,000 from your settlement if you end up making an uninsured motorist settlement with Lyft's insurer or the car that caused the accident, or Lyft's bodily injury insurer if the Lyft driver was negligent. Now, I've already mentioned that the passenger of a Lyft vehicle, if the other car causes the accident, meaning due to speeding or failure to yield right away or an improper turn, but if the other car's driver causes the accident, you can sue the other driver, or typically it's making a claim against them and trying to resolve it before a lawsuit, which can save stress and expense. And you'd be entitled to past out-of-pocket medical bills and future medical bills, lost wages and future lost wages, and pain and suffering, both past and future. You may need to have a permanent injury in order to qualify for money for pain and suffering. That's because if the Lyft vehicle had PIP and you were entitled to PIP, and the party that caused the accident also had an auto insurance policy in Florida that had PIP, you likely need a permanent injury in order to get money for pain and suffering. Now, if the other car caused the accident and they don't have enough bodily injury liability insurance, such as what happened in my case where they only had $25,000 and we argued that the claim was worth more than $25,000. Lyft's uninsured motorist insurance is excess. It's above any other uninsured motorist insurance, or at least that's what the Lyft adjuster told me, the York adjuster told me. In terms of if you're making an uninsured motorist insurance claim, Lyft has the ability to send you to their doctor. It'd be a one-time exam where they examine you. Most uninsured motorist insurers will send you to a doctor who is more conservative, meaning they're more likely, if your injury is in a gray area where one doctor can say that you're badly injured and another doctor can say no, the odds are that the uninsured motorist insurer is going to send you to a doctor who's more likely to side with saying that you're less injured. Now, it's always a great idea to get a crash report. Also, you can notify Lyft through the app if the passenger is injured. You can also directly submit the claim to York, again, who administers the claims for Lyft, meaning send your notice out as soon as possible. It's always good, again, to get a crash report sooner rather than later, and to get treatment if you need it as soon as possible. And don't be surprised if a passenger waits to get medical treatment and the Lyft adjuster ends up telling them, or York's adjuster ends up telling them, how badly were you injured? If you waited 2 weeks to get medical treatment, is your injury related to the accident? Also, all things equal, the greater the damage to the car, the greater the settlement, because the theory goes, at least the insurance adjusters and many jurors assume that a badly damaged car can equate to someone being hurt very badly. Whereas if there's very little damage to the car, expect Lyft's insurer to fight the case harder, or the other company's insurer to fight the case harder. In the case that I represented the gentleman in, where he had tears to his foot and his hand, and we settled for $70,000. One of the reasons why Geico quickly paid their $25,000 per person bodily injury limits is because the value of my client's case was about $70,000 and the limits were $25,000. And if Geico failed to pay that amount, and we ended up getting a verdict against the Geico's insured, the driver, for $75,000, that driver could end up suing Geico or signing his claim to my client, and Geico doesn't want to have to pay an extra $50,000 when they could have just paid $25,000 and gotten out of the case. So Geico was relatively quick about paying the $25,000, and that's not uncommon if there's a low limits policy and an injury that's worth more. And Lyft actually wasn't that bad in terms of the time it took to resolve the claim with them. Once we submitted all the paperwork, there really wasn't much delay. And when I say Lyft, again, York, there really wasn't too much delay in resolving the case. Once negotiations began, they went kind of smoothly. The York adjusters that I dealt with were overall very friendly. When an injured person settles a case with the other car's insurance company, or Lyft's uninsured motorist insurer, what typically happens is you sign a release at the end of the claim. Understand that that language needs to be negotiated on most of the time. In my claim, it went back and forth with Lyft, and I made sure that the language was in the best interest of my client. I didn't just agree to have my client sign what Lyft's release said. Lyft's release was not confidential. It didn't have a confidentiality clause, so that's why I'm talking about the settlement here. That appears to be different from Uber. If you go online, I wasn't able to find any Uber settlement amounts other than 2, so I likely think that Uber may be requiring confidentiality, but I have to give some points to Lyft just for doing the right thing. If you settle with State Farm, Geico, Progressive, Allstate, Travelers, USAA, they typically do not require confidentiality. So all Lyft is doing, or York is doing with Zurich Insurance Company, is just doing the right thing and not requiring confidentiality, as it can possibly have tax consequences that can hurt the injured person. If you like this video, please like it, please comment, please subscribe to our channel, and watch our other videos. We have a lot of interesting information on all types of accidents, and I plan on making many, many more videos. My name is Justin Ziegler. My office is in Miami. I serve the entire state of Florida. Have a beautiful day.